Welcome. Thanks, Leigh. It's absolutely great to have you here. So, Craig and I are delighted to have you here for our podcast, our MQ Open Mind podcast. And so I'm just really excited. I've been reading up about the incredible achievements. Incredible, truly incredible. I can cycle a bike from maybe I could do from Glasgow to a wee bit further from Glasgow, but that's about as far as I would go, mainly because I'm frightened of other road users. But what was it in September 2018? You're now a world record holder, fastest person to cycle across Europe. So, and 16 days, 10 hours, 45 minutes or something like that, I've been reading. Just incredible. So maybe could you tell us a bit about, well, really your interest in sort of mental health and cycling? Just take us a bit about your journey, your history.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for your kind words. That's amazing. And you've done the research. Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. Sometimes it takes me a while to remember the numbers, so you've done a really good job. But the world record is kind of just the latest part of the achievements, the things that I've done on the bike. So I was always into bikes. I've been into bikes since I was a kid. And I guess for me, a big part of it has been kind of the freedom that the bike gives to you. It's a bit of an escape from no matter what you're going through. I think this is why cycling's taken off so much recently. Mm-hmm. The stresses that we all go through at work, the stress that you go through at university or school or, the home life. There's so many pressures nowadays. And the bike gives you that moment to be out in the place that you want to be in at your own pace, going at your own speed with your own thoughts. Or one of the things for me, the difference between mountain biking and road biking, the road, you've got all this time to kind of think about what's going on. It's almost like meditative kind of a state where you've got that repetition and you're cycling and you're thinking. Or if we go off-road, you're completely in that moment of flow where you're avoiding trees and rocks. There's a jump, there's a descent, there's a climb, and hours can disappear. I love these kind of poetic, like the poetic nature of the bike. I love getting out. And I guess the biggest escape for me was in 2010. I went off and I decided to ride a bike around the world. That for me was going to be a 2 to 3 year adventure, but it turned into a huge kind of, I guess I'd call it like a pursuit of happiness in a way. I thought I was going to.
But that's a bit of a leap, is it, from enjoying the scenery and getting away from things, cycling, to then doing this really extreme, huge commitment of time and your life. So what brought you from that first bit of being cycling for pleasure, for distraction, for mental health and well-being, to really making that huge decision then to dedicate so much of your time and to doing that?
To doing the world record. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It was a year's total dedication to the target. It was never supposed to be. The bike was it was so much fun. Those great memories that I've got as a kid, I'd finish school, I'd go home as quickly as possible, grab my bike and go over to my friend's house, and we'd watch these videos. It was a little bit different back in the mid-90s. It wasn't all about like your sponsorship and your achievements and, looking better than each other. We used to watch this video called Dirt, and it was about mountain bikers that were the UK's best cyclists, but they were just out like doing tricks with their friends, hanging out in a cottage, riding through some of the iconic areas of the UK. And that's who we wanted to be, just these three guys having an amazing time. So we'd watch these videos and then we'd emulate their tricks in the woods up the road. And I just remember it like the sun being cast through the trees and the dust being kicked up, and it was fun. That was what I wanted to do. I think along the way through life, I got confused between making myself happy and making other people happy. And then you do start to pursue greater things. In fact, I gave up cycling when I was at university because I wanted to achieve success, to get the first class degree, to get the best job, to get wealth, and then you'll be successful and everyone will love you. And it didn't turn out like that at all. That actually kind of ended up being where I started to struggle with my own mental health. But coming back from around the world, which was purely that pursuit of what I loved as a child, and it had started as an escape, I realized that I wasn't going to find maybe what I was looking for going around the world on the bike. It wasn't about the bike, it was something else. And that was a 7-year adventure. Towards the last year or two, I was looking for community. I was looking for belonging. I was looking for relationships. And so I started to come home. When I got home, I suddenly realized, for 7 years, you've been the guy who's riding a bike around the world. And then you become the guy who rode his bike around the world. And you're confronted with the same things. I thought I'd go away and come back as those heroes that I'd aspired to be. You see people who sail around the world or they climb the highest mountain. You think life must never faze them. You must be undaunted by everything. You could attack everything. And I got back and realized I was the same person as I was before, with the same pressures and responsibilities, financial, relationships, whatever it was, dealing with it in the same way. Overwhelmed, anxious, depressed. And so I think at that point, I looked for the next big thing. What's the next escape? What's bigger than going around the world? And for me, it was a world record. What changed at that point is I kind of, unknown to me at the time, kind of took on a mentor, a businessman who was really successful and started to guide me in the way that I could shape my life around cycling now that I'd come back, using the skills and the experiences that I'd had. And we looked at this world record together, and it said that Guinness World Records made no differentiation between a supported or an unsupported effort. And so he started to ask me, in which way would you be able to give it your best attempt? And I was like, yeah, well, supported, but I don't need to because I could go out and do it myself now. And he's like, okay, in which way will you mitigate the risks better? Well, yeah, with the team, but I can do it now. I can just fly out. He's like, if that's the best way you can do it, that's the way you'll do it.
Yeah.
So I started to look at not what I could do, but what I wanted to do. And I built this team of scientists around the project. And suddenly everything was growing around me. It became this very big professional attempt that I'd never expect. I thought I'd needed a coach, a nutritionist, and a sports massage. And I ended up with this huge science team based out of universities and with rigorous research and data around everything. It completely changed me. But I think it was so beneficial. Instead of kind of going through this repetition of I could ride a bike around the world, I could do a world record, actually, it became this journey of growth because, as I'd explained, when I got back from around the world, I was still the same person. I'd explored the world external to myself, thinking I was going to change. But in order to change, you've got to look within.
Yeah.
And with this team of physiologists, psychologists, nutritionists, I had to look at myself in a way that I'd never been brave enough to before. When you go through these things, if you really want to grow, you've got to analyze what's happened. You've got to look at those dark places and find the solutions, develop solutions to what you want to be.
So what do you think you were escaping from, and how, in terms of the context of your own mental health and well-being?
Yeah, let's take it right back, because I think this is a really poignant, it's a pivotal moment in my life. So I'd gone to university to study film. It was kind of this weird world where the cycling didn't quite fit in. I remember this show and tell day at university where everyone was bringing in their favorite film or their favorite book, or they'd been to see this band. It was culture. It was like arts, the arts world. And I brought in this bike and I was like, it's made of these amazing carbon fiber parts. And I'm spending 5 to 10 hours a week training, and we go out in the woods, and the suspension's really cool. And everyone around me was like, what are you doing spending all your time just riding bikes around? What's it actually getting for you? And I didn't really know, it wasn't making money. It wasn't making me a better filmmaker. It was just costing me time. And I didn't really get it. Looking back now, I'd be like, well, this is enjoyment. This is who I am. It defines me. But at the time, I didn't see it in that idea of success, making money, being successful, having the respect of people around you, that kind of stuff. And so I ended up giving up cycling. Focused on getting a degree, got a first class, got the best result in my year, came out from that, became a self-employed filmmaker, and I was quite good at it. I was working in education, teaching young people how to make films and animations. I worked in feature films, I worked in short films, music videos, so got all of those things, ticked all of the boxes. But I missed out the really important stuff. I didn't have anything that I enjoyed doing.
Mm-hmm.
I worked really hard thinking, if I work harder, I'll dig myself out of this. I'll become more successful. I'll have more money. More people will like me. But I just dug myself deeper and deeper into this hole. I lived in a place where I lived in Newcastle, which was amazing up there. But all my friends moved away after university. Mm-hmm. I lived 3 hours away from my family. So I was quite lonely. very stressed, working really hard. And in the end, went to see the doctor about it and ended up in counseling for depression, which is where I realized I wasn't, but at the time I would never have realized that I didn't have the capacity to look within myself. You know, we'd go through these philosophies of Maslow's hierarchy of needs or the family script, all of these kind of things. And I'd love that philosophical conversation. Oh yeah, it would be awful if you forgot these levels or you weren't focusing on these areas of your life. But I couldn't look inside myself. I'd divert the conversations to the principles of it.
But what was that? What was preventing you from looking inside, do you think? Have you any sense of that? Was it a fear of what you'd find, type beta, or did you'd mentioned earlier, I think, the sort of some of the dark times? Was it along those lines, or just it's something you'd never done and you were so focused on moving forward?
It was 100%.
Take the time to look backward, look inside.
It was something that I had never done. I wonder if I'm 40 years old. I wonder if my generation, we never, or maybe it's just for me, I didn't get brought up with that ability to communicate my emotions very well. Yeah. I didn't have a vocabulary to explain what I was going through. I didn't have a problem talking about what I was going through. It kind of felt like a relief, actually. I'd never really done it, you know. Oh, what were you thinking that night when you were alone at home, or you walked out of the club with all your mates there and you just walked through the streets feeling so sad? And I was happy to talk about it, but I couldn't look within and go, actually, these are some of the changes that I need to make in my life. And I remember it being given homework to do by the counsellor, but not doing it because it wasn't important. It wasn't something that was going to make me more money or more friends. You know, it was self-development. And I guess that there was kind of a stigma within my own life, like self-development, looking at myself, thinking about my emotions. God, that's something I'd never do. It's not my thing. And so I just swept it under the carpet.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering then, so part of, again, just me thinking about some of the work that we do work on perfectionism. And a lot of what you're describing is that sense of there's different types of perfectionism, but not, because I think you were talking about trying to make other people like you. I think is what the words you said, or so that's what we sometimes describe that as socially prescribed perfectionism or social perfectionism, and then your self-worth is driven by a large part trying to make other people or to impress others or to do what you think others expect of you. Would that ring true at all or not at all?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, without a doubt. You know, looking at, I've got to get that degree so everyone thinks I'm successful. I've got to earn the money. I'll forget those jobs people like me. And even recently, on the last world record for sure, a lot of the things that I was concerned about are, well, what if another cyclist could do better than this? What am I going to look like if I don't live up to this expectation? And even to the point of I work with a psychologist on all these projects, the world records. And on the first one, he asked me what my motivation was, what was my why. And first off, you know, it was that very shallow, well, it's to get the world record, you know. And he was like, well, that's not really good enough, Leigh. Is there something else? I was like, well, okay, well, it's the respect of people around me then, isn't it? It's not just a certificate. People will know that I'm the greatest cyclist at riding across the continent and this. He's like, let's take it back a bit. Okay, so what if you don't get a certificate? What if people don't respect you? Was it all a waste of time? What your motivation has to be something intrinsic to yourself. And we ended up going through a lot of my backstory and a lot of the things that were important to me. And at the end of the day, it was how I decided to define myself. That's the thing that it came down to, which was intrinsic. And that was something that it was very difficult for me to deal with. It wasn't, we just talked about kind of this lack of education of how to talk about your emotions or start to deal with things. I think going around the world, I started to build awareness, but definitely at this time, thinking about what it means to me. So we came up with this motivation that was when the world is really throwing everything at you, you've got nothing left and everything's going wrong, what is the decision that you make that defines you? And it was always the idea to keep on going, you know, at the finish, your finish line version of yourself, what would they be saying when it's cold and it's dark and you want to give up? And that finish line version doesn't care about how comfortable you are. They just want you to get the record, you know, come on, Leigh. It's about being your own cheerleader. But going back to the perfectionism, I really struggled a lot on the last record with that comparison and living up to expectations of others that I was creating in my own mind as well.
Yeah.
Just recently, I found myself doing it again. I had a really stressful week a couple of weeks ago. You know, this kind of project does bring along a lot of stress. There's so many aspects of breaking a world record. And a couple of weeks ago, it was a really stressful one. And I was talking to the physiologist, the guy who was training my body, and explaining, it's been a really hard week. This is going on, that's going on. He was like, do you really need to lead on all of that? And I said, oh, no, I'm not leading on it. Somebody else has got that. And he was like, well, what are you doing then? You realize it's because you want everything to be right from your own point of view. You want everything to be, you're a perfectionist. He said the exact words. And then after the call, I opened my computer and there was a website where they'd written my bio up there, but they'd written something wrong. So I was rewriting that for them. And there was another area and I was recreating this for somebody else. And I suddenly stepped back and realized none of that is actually important. Like, it doesn't matter. We've got to, good enough, it's done. Let's move on to the next step.
But it's always this balance, isn't it, though? Because the reason why you're so successful, the reason you've achieved these incredible feats is because of that intrinsic drive. That's in part that perfectionism and drive. But the flip side then, as you're just highlighting, is wanting to be in control of everything and everything to be just as you want it is so exhausting. And it always reminds me of the fact that I remember when I was training early days as a psychologist, and I can remember some lecture at uni, and it was the idea that when we think about physical capacity, we all know there's only a certain amount we'll get exhausted. We're all limited in the amount of physical energy we can actually expend. And it's exactly the same for mental health. And if you're using so much of your energy, and I do the same. I'm a social perfectionist as well, and you waste so much energy, and that's energy which could be used for more fulfilling things. And I find that balance. So maybe kind of move us on a wee bit on this, because actually I'm going to come back to the idea. Well, I'll maybe just say it now. If you're not able, in your case, to cycle, what else do you do, or are you doing other things to manage your mental health? You mentioned earlier the counselor experience. So do you want to maybe, because I think we only got partway through your journey there earlier.
So a lot of the management of mental health is kind of through the psychologist within the world record team, actually. There's obviously a great awareness of the amount of stress you've got to deal with. It is a strange dichotomy that in one way, I feel like I'm alive when I'm pushing myself. I'm creating a new project. I'm growing. You're pushing the limits of what's physically possible. And I love that. I think that it's just in my nature to continue pushing and growing. But at the same time, that does deliver this huge amount of stress. So in the first world record, we went through, it was called a performance profile, where you outlined the most important characteristics that you think you'll need to break that record. And for me at the time, I was completely new to this, and I just saw performance, and it was all about mental toughness and financing it. And I know it's all of these very performance-based things. What the first round of psychological interventions came down to was actually what we called being the best at the skills that require no talent. And it was organizing your space around you and your laptop your desktop on your computer. So I was spending more time looking for things than I was actually using them. My life was so disorganized. If we just tidied that up, it saves so much stress and so much time. Same with time management. I had a paper diary. I had a bigger paper diary. I had the one on my computer that was linked to various different email addresses. It was all over the place. And so we combined them all into one. And within each appointment, it was prioritized whether it was a fixed time and I needed to account for the time to get there and the things that I needed and who I was meeting, all of the details, or if it was flexible, I'd color code it in green rather than red.
Yeah.
Then the most important thing of those skills that require no talent was sleep. Phil, the psychologist, described sleep as the greatest performance enhancing drug in the world and the least used. And you're kind of getting an idea of the kind of person that I am. I can be quite frantic and stressed, and there's a lot of things to do. All the plates are spinning, and the idea of sleep was wasted time to me. I was like, well, you're telling me to stop doing whatever I'm working on at 9 o'clock, have an hour just to myself, and then put in 8 hours of sleep before I can get up and do it. That's 9 hours of wasted time. I can go to bed at midnight. I'll get up at 5. I'll just work harder. And it took a lot. It took them getting out some white papers and case studies and delivering it to me and showing these are actually scientifically proven benefits. You will work at such a higher capacity if you sleep more.
Oh, I mean, the sleep is so important. It's something in the mental health sphere. It really has now become so getting so much more focus than it ever has in the past. But you're right. So because it impacts not only on there's some evidence that it can influence your genetic whatever expression, your gene expression, as well as obviously your psychological health, your physical health. So then I'm just curious then how you went from, or have you gone from the going to bed at midnight, getting up at 5? Are you doing the 8 hours now? And let's be honest here.
Yeah, I do. I would say, well, I always get more than 7. It's always between 7 and 8.
All right.
Yeah.
So have you any tips on how you've done that? Because I think a lot of people will struggle with going from the short sleep or the disrupted sleep to a regular sleep pattern. So what do you think worked for you?
There's a lot of things. We did a whole load of work on sleep hygiene. So there's so many things. From another thing that we did was creating zones in my life. So there was a working zone. If I was on the bike or at the desk, everything around me was 100% focused on being set up for work. Mm-hmm. If I was in my relaxing space at somebody else's home or in my lounge, it's set up to relax in. And the other one was the sleeping space. So sleep hygiene is all about making sure it's dark enough that your body is ready to sleep. Use blackout blinds. Make sure it's the right temperature. I think it was around 16 degrees was ideal for sleeping. Take any electronics out of the room. There's no distractions. So even my phone is set up in a different room. When the alarm goes off, it kind of double works because I have to get out of my bed into the cold air and then go and walk to a different room. And then you're out your bed. Not eating an hour before you go to bed, making sure you're on top of your caffeine intake. So I don't drink coffee after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a lot of different things, but the beauty of it is there's so many books about it. You can read so much. Yeah. It's very easy stuff to implement as well. When I started to feel the benefits of it, that you would wake up and be fresh, or you would hit those targets in the gym that you've not been able to before because you're recovered, your body is building. I started to see the benefits. And I really believe that performance increase comes down to habits and routines. And if you can build small habits, I mean, just starting small and being able to build them in gradually is much better than going, right, I'm going from 5 hours to 8 hours and it's all or nothing. Yeah. You end up failing. But, bit by bit, you build these new routines into your life. And
so as part of your training, though, have you been monitoring how much sleep? Do you record how much sleep you get? And is that level of, and then do you then see your physical performance? And have you been able to see that directly, the clear and very clear benefits of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the last world record, we did a sleep diary. It was quite crude in a way. It was down to, I'd write down the time that I went to bed, how long I thought it took me to fall asleep, and then what time I woke up, and kind of whether I felt like it was good or bad quality. It was very much on my own perception of it. I didn't have to analyze the data. The team are always analyzing what I'm outputting. They saw the definite increase in performance from sleep. Another area of my life was nutrition as well. I worked with a nutritionist to start with, who I didn't have any control over the food I was eating. I think that the calorie intake was restricted too much, and the team would see my performance tapering off. Mm-hmm. We had a weekend where they're like, okay, Leigh, why don't you just go have a blowout, go and get a pizza, have a night out, just enjoy yourself. So like everything that I do in my life, I went to town on it. I had 2 starters. I had a main course. There was a special on desserts. I had a couple of those. It was 2 for 1s on cocktails. Just bring them all in. All or nothing in my life at that time. But went back into the gym on the Monday, 15% power increase. So yeah, I think that, sleep, we definitely saw it in there. Nutrition, enjoyment as well, to be in a good space in your mind. And that, just bringing it right back to this record now. I've been working with a psychologist for maybe 2 months now for this record. And it's very much about enjoying the journey. I've got this capacity in my mind where I very much focus on the achievement. Ironically, at the end of the last record, I got to the finish line and realized that, you just broke a record, and I felt completely empty. I've broken a record by 9 days. It was unbelievable. And I didn't feel like there was anything in it. I wondered why I'd done it. And this time it's much more about enjoying the process, understanding why you're doing things. And so we've set up three things that kind of work very well in this podcast, actually. The first thing is every morning when I wake up, I have to write three things that I'm grateful for from the day before.
Yeah.
And previously, what I found myself in was quite a negative mindset that I would have to try and find interventions to get myself into a positive mindset. Like, okay, well, I'm going through this hard time on the bike. How am I going to get myself out of it? What can I think of? Whereas starting with three things I'm grateful for in the day, and I write them in a gratitude diary, I've got those things, they're automatically primed when I hit a difficult time. So if I'm doing a training session, oh, I can't do this, I can't do it. Okay, what was that good thing that I thought of? Yes, oh yeah, I did spend that time with my mum. It was lovely, actually. The birds were singing. Yeah, to put that straight in your mind.
Well, I think the gratitude diary is a great idea, and because I think you're right, we spend so much of our time focusing on the things that go wrong and not enough focusing on the stuff that has gone right. And so I think that's a brilliant tip. So I'm loving that tip, and obviously I really like the point you made also earlier about the sleep. Subjective sleep is how you feel, because again, there's 101 different ways in which you can measure sleep quality, but my understanding of some of the research on sleep and mental health is actually just your self-report of actually, do you think you've had a good night's sleep, is actually a good predictor, a relatively good predictor. And so even also for a message for people listening to this, so you don't have to do all this regular monitoring if you're not, well, unless you're going for a world record, of course. But if you're not, you can just, it's really good just to try and remind yourself, well, I actually did have a good night's sleep, and try to think then of what characteristics of that sleep hygiene, and they're great examples you've given. Sadly, I haven't got, as well as you, my phone's still beside my bed. I'll take a big range to move that. I don't want to hear.
I still sleep with a nightlight, so.
You sleep with a nightlight? And so it doesn't keep you awake. I
don't like the idea of waking up in the middle of the night and seeing nothing but, darkness. I watch too many horror movies. There's someone in the corner, let me just have a little light in the corner so I can get my bearings.
Craig, we've got a lot of work to do with you.
That might take beyond this podcast. Here, so can I bring it back for a second to MQ? So Leigh, you're one of our ambassadors. So do you want to tell us a bit about how you got involved with MQ, and really, as you know, one of the key aims of MQ is to set the agenda for research, and that's what we're trying to do. And we try to do that working and speaking with our ambassadors to get some sense of that. So two things in one: how did you get involved in MQ? What do you think about it? And then maybe what do you see as the key research priorities from your mind?
Yeah, I got involved with MQ with the previous record, actually. So before I went around the world, so that was 2010, I think there was quite a big stigma around mental health. Looking back, I think I should have raised money for mental health awareness then, but in a lot of ways, I didn't want to talk about my own experiences because people, are people going to judge me on it? Are people going to just think that I'm not capable of doing these things because of what I've gone through? And I came back and the world was slightly different. That stigma had been kind of relieved a little bit. And I was talking to my mentor about who I was going to support through this world record. Now, he was like, why haven't you ever done anything for mental health before? I was like, well, the stigma, is that our sponsors going to want to come on board with somebody who's gone through these problems? Or, will it be seen as detrimental to my performance? He's like, no, this is the time to talk about it. And so I started to look at various mental health charities, and they're all brilliant. There were so many out there, but it seemed like they were all dealing with helping people with the symptoms, when you're going through it, rather than looking for the solutions, looking for how can we research, how can we understand more about it. And our projects are so driven by research and data and understanding how we can develop a better performance. And mental health is so intrinsic to it all. When I found MQ, I was like, well, that's it. This is the perfect partnership. It's science and it's improvement and it's mental health. It's everything that I'm about. Bringing my whole backstory into it, and my own experiences of depression as well and anxiety. It just felt like the perfect fit. So I started to fundraise for them on the last world record, and since then we've done some speaking events. I speak about my own experiences and some of the tools that I've shared today. With corporates and at bike shows and things like that. It just works really well. And I guess it does tie into my ideals for the future. The reason that I want to support mental health research is it would be great to have a world in the future where people don't have to go through what I went through, you know, where there's a society that's understanding of what people are going through. And I still feel nowadays, even though I don't think there's such a stigma around mental health, but there certainly is still people, when people realize what you've gone through, like if I talk, people meet me as a world record holder or somebody who's cycled around the world and then say, oh yeah, I struggle with depression and anxiety. Really, you? Like that shouldn't be something that, you know, is a surprise. It's just, we all have mental health, whether it's, you know, you're in a good place or a bad place. So I think the understanding of mental health, we still have a long way to go in society. I think that within research, it would be great to just have tests to understand when people are young, if they're susceptible to certain types of maybe mental illnesses, so that support could be put in place, or there could be some kind of structure around people's lives who might be susceptible. They might have those genetic codes. And I think that within, you know, society in general, I think that just to develop, you know, with smart technology, there's smartwatches and phones, we're tracking more and more, we're tracking sleep, we're tracking stress. And I think that when we start to develop that, and in like a health checkup in the doctors where you'd have a physical checkup, you have that same mental one as well. So there's an alarm going off on your watch, okay, you're really stressed, and there's something you can do, whether it's medicinal or whether it's more holistic approach to overcome those symptoms. I think that for me, they're the kind of key areas.
Yeah, no, I think they're great suggestions. I think we've, in the last 10 or 20 years, I think within the mental health field, the mental health research field, or what we now describe it as the mental health science field, we have made progress in terms of getting better at prediction, but I think we're still a long way off, and it recognizes the fact that depression or anxiety or any mental health problems, there's no one risk factor. It's multifactorial, and that's the challenge. But I think you're right. If we can do more earlier on, early identification will lead to hopefully better intervention and better health outcomes. So no, they're great suggestions indeed. No, the bits I'm just curious on, just what you said about I think it was between 2010 and then more recently in the last 10 years or so, you've personally seen this shift in less stigma. Have you any sense of why that stigma? Why do you think we've been able to challenge that stigma better? Have you any suggestions why you think it's worked?
I'm really impressed by the work that goes on in schools, to be honest. I end up speaking in a lot of schools about my own journey, and a lot of it's finding your place in the world and pursuing your dreams. And, you know, if you're in a school, you just get to see life unfolding. There's no pretense. It's just these kids are going to have a fight. They're going to throw food across the food floor. This is what's going to happen. But when you see an argument in school nowadays, when I was young, you know, Leigh, you're over in that corner. Billy, you're in that corner. You're an idiot. You've got detention tonight. What do you think you were doing? Your parents are going to hear about this. That's what it was like. And now they take 2 or 3 or however many children are arguing to one side and they say, okay, what was actually going on there? Do you think that was actually related to this moment? Do you think something might have happened yesterday? Is there something that you were struggling to communicate that you had to express, you found yourself expressing it physically rather than just using your words? And the children are developing a vocabulary to be able to explain their emotions. And you'll see charts on walls where if you don't quite know what you're feeling, is it within this sad bracket? And then within sad, there's another few words that you might be able to express. And you can take inspiration from some emotional guide on the wall. And I think that seeing that is a real positive step towards understanding mental health and to be able to help each other through it. I think that there's a lot more support for people nowadays because of that understanding.
No, I think you're right. I think there's so much how we've changed. And I have 2 kids, and actually my daughter just finished school yesterday, which I just can't understand how the heck that's happened. But it just seeing now how schools operate compared to, as you say, when we were at school, it's very, very different. So no, that's a great message, I think.
I didn't know that you was a filmmaker.
Oh yeah, I've got a degree in filmmaking, and motion graphics.
As a filmmaker myself, I was just wondering, do you feel that you gravitate to more difficult occupations, difficult tasks, more than other people. I guess the rule for like filmmakers, as many people who go to uni or who have that passion, very few become a Spielberg, a Christopher Nolan, you know, a Tarantino.
Mm.
Especially even going for like world records, like most people can't do that. Do you feel like you gravitate to, do you have that inside you to gravitate to those type of tasks?
No. You know what? I got into filmmaking because I wanted to make outdoor pursuits videos. I wanted to be the guy that jumped out the plane before the client and filmed them falling to the ground. I wanted to be the guy that went out and filmed for Red Bull, like doing the crazy downhill mountain bike and stuff like that. And through university, it was a strange time. I think maybe this is a problem with education in a way. You kind of get guided towards something that might not be you. I got pushed. I mean, I loved doing animation, actually. I really enjoyed it. I went from a world where you kind of have to work with what's around you, and then suddenly in animation, you create your own world. Maybe that was a fantastic way for me to escape. You know, actually, at that time in my life, I was probably in quite a good place until the third year. I think that's when things changed. What I realized coming out of that was that I didn't find the right place in the industry to work. I ended up maybe teaching people too much, so enabling people to have the facility to create their own stories. You know, I saw young people making their own stories, but I wasn't making mine. I was teaching other people how to do it. And maybe at that time, I also felt like I didn't have stories to tell. I guess that's always dependent on the way you see your life as well, which is quite a big telltale. You know, I've got no stories to tell in my life. I don't do anything interesting. Actually, maybe I should have just dug a bit deeper and learned who it was that I was trying to be. I would kind of like to do a bit more filmmaking now. I think that it, you know, when I was going around the world, I always wished that I was a doctor, because just to have the skills that are necessary to change somebody's life in a moment. If you find somebody injured at the side of the road, you can change their life, or you can help people. And someone said to me, it doesn't matter what skills you've got, what qualification you've got, you can use it to better other people's lives. And I think that filmmaking in this day and age has the ability to do so much. You can share someone's messages, you can communicate so well with people. So I think it's a really powerful tool. I haven't really gone on to do anything like that. You know, the cycling around the world was always just supposed to be a journey of happiness, to try and find, you know, at that time, there was a guy called Mark Beaumont who had just gone around the world, broken the world record for it. And I thought, why would you like push yourself going around? There's an amazing world to see. I'm going to take my time and do it. And then I come back and break a world record instead. It's a bit of a weird one. I think that everyone's journey is different. I think that in pushing myself on the world records, just as if you're pushing yourself in film or pushing yourself in whatever you do, you learn something new about yourself. And that is the reason why I push myself. If I did it and didn't learn anything, I don't think I'd find any value in it. And that's kind of what I say. If anyone asks, when someone breaks your record, are you going to be sad about it? No, hopefully they will learn all of that stuff that I got to learn in the run up to it, and they'll become an incredible person for it. They'll learn so much about themselves. That would be brilliant.
It's like a shared experience.
Yeah. And it is, you know, I think that the most valuable things are shared. Have you ever heard of that philosophy? It's a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai.
It sounds familiar.
There was a book that was popular about it about 2-3 years ago, something like that. And it's the Japanese word for purpose or meaning. And this book talks about, you know, those Venn diagrams where there's circles are overlapping. Mm-hmm. So there's these four things in life. And if you can find the job that incorporates them all and they overlap, then you found your purpose in the world. So those circles were something you love, something you're good at, something you can make money from, and something the world needs. And if you can find the job that incorporates all of those, they all overlap, then you found your purpose. And the really interesting one there is the thing that the world needs for me. You know, you could say you were a guitarist and you were really good at it and you enjoyed it and you made money from it. think if you weren't sharing it, if you weren't on stage letting people listen to it or teaching people how to play the guitar themselves, it would almost become kind of meaningless just to sit at home playing the most amazing guitar in the world, but not sharing it with people. I think that we kind of have to. So I really enjoy that work that I do in schools. I enjoy going out and speaking at corporate events. So, it's a nice way that you can make money from your experiences, but also all of this stuff that I put myself through. Somebody once described it as, they said I should do a PhD because I'm basically putting myself through a load of tests, finding some results, and I could create some really interesting papers from it.
Your dissertation.
Yeah, I am. And it's so weird. I'm the product at the end of all of this. It's a very weird concept, but everything that I learned, I really hope others can learn from it as well. These tools aren't just to become a great cyclist, they're to overcome your own problems. And those basic ones that we talked about today, the sleep, the creating zones, the organization, they're the things that you need to do to make yourself great at anything. Everyone's got their own passion, and you become good at it because, the 10,000 hour rule, you do something, purposeful practice, 10,000 hours, you become a master at it. That's driven out of practice, that becomes your talent. But there's thousands of people who have become so good at it, and you've just got to build the foundations. Like, we call it an elite athlete's lifestyle, becoming so good at those other small things that then you push your talent much higher just on that solid foundation. So yeah.
So going back to purpose, would you say that you found yours?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do feel like I found my purpose, but I also feel like my purpose over time will change. There are other aspects that I need to build into my life. I've talked about, achieving those targets, and what I've tended to do through life to achieve these great things is sacrifice other areas. So I'll sacrifice time with friends, I'll sacrifice time with family, I'll sacrifice my own personal time. I'll wake up at 6 a.m, I'll be training until 9, then I'm at work, and then from 6 until 9 I'm working hard. I'll maybe fit in some food, and then I'll go to bed, and I'll get up the next day and repeat again, and not leave enough time to just sit and, I love to sit and read a book, watch a film, or spend time with friends. So this time we're looking at that. We've broken down my life into these different areas, and every week I've got to make sure that I'm doing something in each area, and I monitor the stress within each one as well. So on that work level, if stress is going to be high there, I can't have a high level of stress in my athletic training as well. Or if I have got it in both, I've got to make sure that I've got less stress the week after, so I've got time to recover. I think there's a lot of areas that we need to look at, because no matter what you want to be, whether you want to be a great filmmaker or a great cyclist or whatever, it's the human behind that person that has to be amazing. They've got to be happy, they've got to be motivated. And we've talked about having that pot of energy that you've got, and when it's depleted, you can't give any more. What you can do is top it up with positive experiences, which is the things that I've sacrificed. So more time with friends, so that when you're in that difficult situation, you've got those great things to look back on, those 3 things that you're grateful for from the previous day. I did get to spend that time with Craig. We had that wicked conversation, or I spent some time with my mum, and we went out and we did that trampolining or whatever. I don't know. Can't imagine my mum on a trampoline, but yeah, there's different areas where you can invest a bit of energy to get a greater outcome. And I think that, there's a lot of things to learn about that.
It puts you in such a unique situation in terms of the fact that you have so many people around you that help monitor aspects of your life to make you better, and also in a way that you found your purpose. There's people, I guess, who go their whole life and still at the end feel a bit confused to what their purpose in life was. And for someone, so early on in their life to find this, that's amazing.
Yeah, you know what though? It's a really difficult one, because people have said that to me before. And I think anybody could go out and just start walking a path towards what they want to do. And you might not be 100% sure what you want to do. Oh, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Well, just try it. Because if it's not the right thing for you, you at least won't be in the same position, and you can choose another route and then try that, and you'll always be learning. It's an easy thing to say. It's a difficult thing to do, because you kind of have to sacrifice. You have to give up comfort, and you have to give up a nice salary, like all those kinds of things. What I think happened in my life is I got to that point where I'd kind of hit rock bottom, struggling with depression, wasn't happy. I'd achieved all of those amazing successes, you know, I ticked all of the boxes, and it wasn't working for me. And there was this catalyst, a moment when I got to ride a motorbike across Iceland with 2 people that I worked with, and suddenly my eyes were opened, like this landscape of like National Geographic magazine pages of volcanoes and deserts and glaciers and rivers of hot water and bubbling mud, and we were just riding motorbikes across this island, and we'd wild camp in the middle of nowhere. It was just the 3 of us, and I came back after that amazing adventure and went, I've got one life, and the way I'm leading it is not fulfilling.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to lose. What would you do if you had like got one life, you want to use it, what do you want to do? And because I had nothing to lose, I just went for it. And it started with travel. You know, I didn't dive straight into riding a bike around the world. I backpacked. I was going to be a snowboarder. That's what I thought I wanted to do. Like I went to New Zealand, but within months I'd fallen off, broken my collarbone, and that was that, game over. But, you know, I'd started walking the path. I loved to travel. I traveled a bit more around Southeast Asia. Then I lived in Canada. And I loved meeting people. I just, new landscapes, new people, new cultures. It was brilliant. And I linked that up with the motorbike and the bike from when I was young. And I found something that I thought would work. And I just went for it and cycled around the world. Now, I think a lot of things all link up, from something I loved as a kid, something that I was enjoying at the time, the fact that I didn't have any commitments to, you know, I'd given it all up to go and start traveling. And so I could just go out and do it. So when people say, yeah, you're really lucky, I did have to go through this really traumatic experience. You know, going through depression at that time was a horrible experience. I would never want anyone to like hate their life, think, you know, what is the point of going on? The world's better off without me, all of those horrible thoughts. But it put me in a position to go, you know what, let's make a world that I do want to live in. Let's go and do this. So when people turn to me, they're like, you're so lucky to have been able to do that. Well, the flip side of the coin is, you know, I wasn't so lucky to have had the thing that started it. It's a difficult one when you have got things that you would have to sacrifice. You know, if I'd started now, it'd be much more difficult because, you know, there's a house and there's a community around me and stuff like that. Or if you had kids, you know, you can't just run away. But all you can do is start from where you're at and do things that are accessible at that time as well within the situation that you're in. So, yeah, I think anyone has the opportunity to do it, but it's a difficult one to do.
As we try and bring this really fascinating conversation, we genuinely could go on and on to a close. But I maybe just want to pivot slightly and to bring it to an end. So, and I was just curious, as if this is sort of more left field, but I always think it's an interesting left field. So apologies in advance, Leigh. but if and you always see these in whatever newspapers and whatever else, and other podcasts do these sorts of things. So here's two questions. First one is, anybody living or dead you would like to go to, and one or two people, even two people that you would love to have a dinner with or dinner party with. So sorry.
When you were going left field, I was okay, where are we going with this one? I think I'd really enjoy a dinner with Robin Williams. Yeah, firstly, I would love to meet that hilarious man who just sees, well, actually, no, from the outside, you imagine sees the joy in everything, and that great comedian on the stage. But I would also love to know the truth. I'd love to know how he was really feeling. And, you know, to just share that as well, to say, I feel the same. You know, people only see the outside. We live in a society nowadays where it's more prevalent than ever with Instagram and Facebook, and we see these amazing lives that people have, but we don't get to see what's truly underneath and the struggles that people go through. So I would love to have that honest conversation with him, and hopefully a giggle as well. But
that's a great one, because it means, you just said, when we're trying to look at people's mental health, that outward experience or appearance can be very deceptive. And then, okay, so my last one then is, and actually it fits, I think, hopefully quite nicely, because we've been talking about your journey in your thus far, your incredible journey is, well, looking back and thinking about if you could have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
With this one, I was probably given the right advice when I was young, and I didn't listen. My mum always told me and my sister that she didn't mind what we did when we grow up. Just make sure you enjoy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do something that you love. And Emma, I think that my sister did do the things that she loved. She didn't go to university. She traveled around Southeast Asia at a time when it was somewhere that people didn't know. Like, mm-hmm. She really went out and tried to see the world and lived for the experience. In fact, it's an interesting conversation I was having with somebody about a year ago. They asked, why did you go to university? And I was like, well, to get the degree, I needed to get the qualification to get the job. And I asked, why did you go to university? And she said, for the life experience. And it blew my mind. Like, really, that's what we're alive for. It's just to experience, So I guess the advice I'd give my 18-year-old self is listen to your mum.
That's not bad advice.
Yeah, it's not all so important, it's all about enjoying it. It's enjoying the journey. And that's, it's taken me another 22 years to really understand it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. I think that's a great message to end on is, sometimes we all struggle to take advice from others. It doesn't matter what age you are. And so I think that's a great message is maybe, I think as John Donne, the philosopher, said, this idea that no man is an island or no person obviously is an island and recognizing that our lives, we're meant to have people around us or we need support from others. And I think learning and listening to others is a great message. So thanks for that, Leigh. But you're doing another world record. What is it? The greatest distance cycled in 7 days. So clearly, whatever you're doing is working, obviously.
And how do you share that with other people?
Yeah.
I'd love to have a little bit of that as well.
Well, let's just cover that for a second. Now, I want to then maybe reverse back to the sort of how you deal with your mental health. Because I'm thinking about beyond the cycling in a second, and you've touched on some of those things. That's why maybe I'll touch on the team bit element of things now. But yeah, so tell us a bit about this latest challenge. So when's it happening? It hasn't happened yet. I'm right. It hasn't happened.
No, that's right. Yeah, we're just in the early stages of it now. So the world record is for the greatest distance cycled in 7 days. The record currently stands at 2,180 miles, which is 311 a day. It's a fascinating record. It's kind of, it's similar, in the fact that it's an ultra endurance cycling event. So the experience is there, but then it's almost the opposite in a way, where on the previous record, it was A to B. It was a distance going across Europe. This time, the time is counting down. So where you were riding towards the target, now that target time is kind of counting down towards you. So there's there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure built around that one.
So of course, so the mindset must be completely different then.
Yeah, and also where you might think, okay, well, this one was 7 days. The last one was 16 days. You've got to ride half as much. It's going to be half as difficult. The capacity that I've got to ride at every day is heightened. So last time I rode 240 miles a day. This time I've got to ride over 311. So you're riding at a higher intensity, which is also quite difficult on the mind. The body can do incredible things that will always slow you down. In fact, there was this kind of a very poignant sentence that it was the crux of the last record in a lot of ways, where you can be the fastest cyclist in the world on the start line, but it doesn't matter at all unless you've got a mind that is strong enough to get you to the finish line.
Yeah.
And I think that transcends sport. That goes throughout everything, no matter what you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in line with that, with MQ, we're running a project called 7 Days of Smiles, which is an opportunity for anyone to get involved as well. So between Mental Health Awareness Week, which starts the 9th of May, all the way through 6 months later, when I start the world record on around the 7th of November, we run this project where you can do 7 days of activity. It can be any time. You don't have to do them all in a row like I'm doing. And it's an opportunity to just get out. I think over the last 2 years, we've seen the decline of physical activity and the decline of mental health through the pandemic. And this is an opportunity to set yourself a small target, 7 days, whether it's walking the dog a bit longer those days, or there's a lady on our Facebook group who's turning 50 this year. She wants to ride 50 kilometers for 7 days through those 6 months. Set that target. And this year's theme for mental health awareness is loneliness. So it's great if you go out and do it alone. Try and socialize it, try and share your stories, support each other on social media, but even better, go out and do it as a family, do it as a group of friends and share that experience. Get outside, do a bit of fitness and raise a bit of awareness, raise a bit of money for MQ.
Fantastic. No, that's a great way. And we'll put on the show notes, we'll put details of the campaign and so on. So that's great. No, thanks again. And thanks to everybody who's listened. Hopefully there's lots of take homes and hopefully people have enjoyed it. And even half as much as I have, we'll have done well. So thanks so much, Leigh. That's fantastic.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Rory. Thanks.
Hey, bye.